Hello everyone, welcome back to Marion's World. I'm Marion and today I have a project and a half on the go and it's all going to be done on the machine. If you've been here before, you might have known that I do what I call sewing my scraps together to make free fabric, and I sew them into chunks of fabric, all my small scraps, and then as soon as I've got something big enough to cut a 6-inch square, I cut the square out and I store them in here until I've got some project to make them with. The last thing I made was a tablecloth just before Christmas, and I'll put a picture of that in there now. Hopefully you can see how pretty that turned out, and that was just my free fabric that I make from all of my scraps. And when I say scraps, I mean little scraps like this. All of the small bits and pieces that I don't throw out. I realised that some of the fabric that I have here is going on for 30 years old, if not a bit more. And all of a sudden, I just wanted rid of it. And I just thought, some of this I just do not use anymore. And so I'll show you what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is this. I used to make quilts and I used to buy the occasional quilting cottons and use thrifted stuff as well. That's an old skirt off my daughter. And actually I don't really use this much anymore. And it's just in a drawer, taking up room. I have it all beautifully folded. It's in colour themes in the drawer. But in the end, I'm not choosing to use this anymore because the way I sew has changed. So instead of just sewing the small scraps up and getting these 6-inch squares that I then keep for ages before I find a project, I thought, yeah, that's free fabric, but it's not really much use for much. What I need is yardage. And so with that, the idea was born to take all of my scraps and then start sewing all of these together until I do have yardage. And then I can actually make something proper with it. I can make a skirt, I could make a dress, I could make a tote bag. Once I've got yardage, I've got a piece of fabric that's big enough to use. So on here I now have the whole drawer of the themed out quilting cotton pieces. And I don't think any of it's going to go back in the drawer. I'm going to get things out of that drawer, the second one down, that's full of scraps. Also, they're coming out and I'm going to end up with a big pile, and I'm going to sit here until I've got yardage. And let's just see how much yardage I actually make. So let's get started. I'm going to get my machine on, I'm going to thread up a few bobbins, and I'm going to start with the small scraps, and I'm gradually going to get bigger and bigger, and I'll measure it so that I know I'm getting yardage. And I'm just going to start like I normally do, getting the smallest patches and sewing them together with a 1/4-inch seam. And I've got my iron set up already, and every so often I'm going to do a big snip apart, iron, and then start again. And as I get bigger pieces, I'll sew some of the bigger pieces together. Wish me luck, everyone. I haven't done this before, but it just seemed to be a good way of emptying the drawers and getting myself some proper free fabric. I start off with some quite small things where I can. Just gets me going. Normally this would be the way I'd start and do my 6-inch squares, but that's not just going to cut it now. There's just far too much. Even pieces of vintage tablecloth are in the mix. Have already been cut up for something else. Here's the fabric of the skirt I just made the other day. Well, it's going to get sewn onto a piece of Michael's trousers. I should have one of those posh wheel things, but I haven't, so I'll just snip it all apart like this and then take it to the machine, iron them open, and then I'll start again. If I can get a 150 across, then I can just keep adding to the length. As I iron them, I'm aiming to get them into rectangular shapes, and so if they need trimming so I can get the next one on, I'm trimming it while I'm here. But something like that, I can put another patch on there and get it to a bigger size before I trim it, so I don't waste anything. So it's just years worth of all sorts. So this is corduroy off my husband's shirt. This is a bit of blue off a dress I made a few years ago. These go back into the pile to become a little one to put together. As with this, I'm aiming not to throw anything away. So all the little pieces go back in, but I think I can cut this one into a regular piece now. There we are. Now I've got one nice piece starting to come along. I'm going to try and get my 150 width before I start adding length on. Maybe this can be the top of it. Well, it's day 2 of sewing all my scraps together to make yardage. I've actually got 1.50 m in width, and now I'm adding to the length. So I think I've got nearly 3 meters so far of length. But back to the sewing machine to start with little scraps and carry on exactly like I did yesterday. So here's to the second day of sewing. From the look at my floor, you wouldn't think that I'd made any difference to the pile of fabric, but I have. Well, I'm sewing on bigger patches now, but I am still ironing between each one and squaring up at the ironing board. This one is nearly big enough to go onto the yardage that I've already got. Once it gets to this size, like that, I'm putting it to one side, and then I have to plan to either join it along the length or along the width with something of a similar size. So I make sure I make up to that size. Well, this is actually day 3 of trying to get all my fabric sewn together into yardage. And as you can see, I still am sewing small bits together to make bigger pieces, which then go on to make bigger pieces. And then once they get to that size, I can add bits from this pile, which are bigger again. So I've got them laid out on my sitting room floor. Once I get them of a certain size, like that, I can then put them together with bigger pieces to make my 1.50 m width, and that's what that piece is there. And then the 1.50 m widths get attached to bigger or longer pieces of 1.50 m width. Now this is currently the 3rd such piece I'm working on. So what I'm doing is I get a piece like that, and then I'm going to get another piece of a similar size. So I'm going to add this and this together and plan a piece for there, and then when those 2 pieces are sewn together, that's ready to be added onto the yardage, but I'm going to do all those addings right at the end. I'll be interested to see how much yardage I make in the end. And this sprint of what I thought was going to be a sprint is turning into an absolute marathon. My goodness. Back to the sewing, the ironing, the adding, the patching and the creating. So that's about to get sewn into one, and then that's another panel ready to add to the length I've already got. Oh my goodness, I've been sewing for 4 days, but I'm on my final seam, and then I'll have a measure up to see just how much fabric I've managed to make out of all of my scraps. In fact, it's not even all my scraps. I've just run out of time for putting them together because it turned into such a marathon. And I have this and this is all in one piece now. It's all been ironed and now it's all crumpled up again as I do my final seam to seam the two halves of the different pieces of fabric together. So off I go on the final straight. And I'll see you at the end with the final tally and a lovely reveal of this beautiful piece of fabric that I've been making from my scraps. Oh my goodness. One last clip. Wow, I can't believe I've come to the end of that. I'm going to take it for a last iron and then I'll measure up just how much fabric I managed to make. Well, I'm about to make the final tally of the amount of fabric I made. I've got my measuring tape. I've put it on the sitting room floor because there's nowhere else you'll be able to see it. It's 1 metre 50 wide, which is 60 inches. And I'll start and pull it so you can see it. So it does look really pretty. So there's 1 metre, 2 meters, 3, 4, 5. That's a lot. 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 meters of 1 metre 50, so that's 15 square meters of fabric. All done. Well, that turned into an absolute marathon of sewing and it's still not actually finished. So I've got 15 square meters here, so that's 10 running meters of fabric, and I feel that it's more usable. I can cut out a dress, I could make a slip cover for my stools, I could make a quilt for somebody. It's there ready to be used and I don't have to fiddle about with little patches. I've done it all in one session. But as well as this bolt of fabric here, I still have about a meter's worth across the whole 150 of patched up pieces ready to jigsaw together. I've just run out of time to be putting them together. So I've got all of those waiting, so they can, in their own right, they're lovely. So they're waiting to be patchwork together and put onto the end to keep it going. And as well as those pieces there, I still have some that I haven't even done, but they are all sort of cut into regular patches now. I'll show you that. This box used to have the scraps in and now it's got all the rest of the material out of my drawers that's just waiting to be put together. There's some really big pieces in here and I'll try not to cut them down, and there are still some small bits in, so I will just carry on putting things together as soon as I've got time to carry on with it. And the other pile I've got are pieces that I took out that I thought were useful for the way I sew now. They just need sorting out. There's some lawn, there are pieces of thrifted material, pieces of denim, just things that I think are useful for the way that I sew now. So that pile there just needs sorting out and going back into the drawer. So you might say, do I think it's worth it? I definitely do think it's been worth it. Some of those fabrics have been in my drawers or in my sewing room, wherever I've been, before I even moved to here, and they're now sewn into a piece of fabric that I can use. And although it's been a lot of sewing, I ended up just challenging myself to get as much done as I possibly could. I did think it took a lot longer than I was thinking. I thought maybe a couple of days worth of sewing, and it was apparent at the end of 2 days that that wasn't going to be long enough. And that's just because I've been sewing a long time and I have scraps of material, because I don't throw little bits out. I always keep them and scrap them down into the little 6 inches. But that was never going to work for the amount of stuff that I had. So I'm really pleased that I did it. I lost count of the amounts of bobbins. I thought I'd be able to keep a total going so I could tell you at the end, but I used 2 full spools of thread and I stopped counting bobbins at about 10. So quite a lot of thread. And my poor machine, I think if it had had a milometer on, I think it must have done a mile of sewing, because it just has been going non-stop between the iron, the scissors, the sitting room where I could lie it out flat and see whether my patchwork pieces were fitting together. All I've done is just go from one to the other for the past 4 days and nights. I have to say, it's been a long time, but 100% it's been worth doing. It's all organised now. I've got the rest of my scraps ready to sew, and these patchwork pieces are ready to go. If you want to see what I was using my little 6 inches for, I'll link the video to the tablecloth I made just before Christmas, and you can have a look at that and see how you can use these pieced up pieces of fabric, so that if you don't want to waste things, like I don't want to be throwing things out that I think is still useful. You can see what I did there, and that tablecloth did not take me very long to do at all. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope you will subscribe if you haven't, and press the like button and make a comment. Tell me whether you would do that, or whether you've got 30 odd years worth of fabric to be patchworking together, and do you even like it? Maybe you'd want to colour theme things out. I definitely quite like the scrappy look, and I was not going to theme out the colours. It was easy for me just to patch it together as it came, with no thought other than the sizes of the pieces I was putting together. So thanks again, thanks for all your support on Ko-fi, on emails, on comments, on absolutely everything, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you when you come back next time to visit me in Marion's World. Bye everyone, thanks a lot.